are in distress, and all these things have come upon you, in the latter days you will return to the Lord your God and listen to his voice. For the Lord your God is a compassionate God. He will not fail you, nor destroy you, nor forget the covenant with your fathers which he swore to them. Indeed, ask now concerning the former days which were before you, since the day the Lord created man on earth, and since the day God created man on earth, and from one end of the heavens to the other, has been done like this great thing, or has been heard of like it. So here he's referring back to the deliverance of Egypt. Has people heard the voice of God speaking from the midst of the fire, as you have heard and survived? Or has God tried to go to take for himself a nation from within nation, by trials, by signs and wonders, by war, and by a mighty hand, and by an outstretched arm, and by terrors, as the Lord your God did for you in Egypt before your eyes? Go ahead, continue at verse 35.
To you it was shown that you might know that the Lord, he is God. There is no other besides him. Out of the heavens he let you hear his voice to discipline you. And on earth he let you see his great fire, and you heard his words from the midst of the fire. Because he loves your fathers, therefore he chose their descendants after them. And he personally brought you from Egypt by his great power, driving out from before you nations greater and mightier than you, to bring you in and to give you their land for an inheritance, as it is today. Know therefore today, and take it to your heart, that the Lord, he is God in heaven above and on the earth below. There is no other.
Yeah, here we're talking about the sovereignty of God. There's nobody else in full control. I'll continue verse 40. So you shall keep his statutes and his commandments which I am giving you today, that it may go well with you and with your children after you, and that you may live long on the land which the Lord your God is giving you for all time. So here that he's telling him, right now I'm giving you this possession of the land as a permanent possession. There's no intent at that point that they should not go in and take full possession of land and keep it for all time. Then Moses set apart 3 cities across the Jordan to the east, that a manslayer might flee there who unintentionally slew his neighbor without having enmity towards him in time past, and by fleeing to one of these cities he might live. And then he lists the 3 cities. Here you have a situation when you go back to the earlier parts of the law in Exodus. You had, you shall not murder.
Right.
But you had 2 situations. You had one where somebody committed premeditated murder, where they lied in wait, they planned to kill somebody, and that was sentenced by death. Here you have an accidental murder where you didn't lie in wait, but something happened, maybe a tractor, or they didn't have tractors, but maybe an animal got loose and pulled a plow and hit somebody and they died, or perhaps just some form of accidental killing. And if you had an accidental killing which is not premeditated, there was an option to avoid the death penalty by fleeing to one of these cities. Now they were restricted as to what they could do in these cities, and they lost some liberty, but they didn't have to suffer the death penalty. Verse 44. Now this is the law which Moses set before the sons of Israel. These are the testimonies and the statutes and the ordinances which Moses spoke to the sons of Israel when they came out from Egypt, across the Jordan in the valley opposite Beth Peor, in the land of Sihon, king of the Amorites, who lived at Heshbon, who Moses and the sons of Israel defeated when they came out from Egypt. They took possession of his land and the land of Og, king of Bashan, the two kings of the Amorites, who were across the Jordan to the east. From Aroer, which is on the edge of the valley of Arnon, even as far as Mount Sion, that is Hermon, with all the Arabia across the Arabah, across the Jordan to the east, even as far as the sea of Arabah, at the foot of the slopes of Pisgah. Then Moses summoned all Israel and said to them, Hear, O Israel, the statutes and the ordinance which I am speaking today in your hearing, that you may learn them and observe them carefully. When we went to the synagogue, that's how they start, Hear, O Israel. So that's okay. Now listen to this. Listen up. I don't know what they say in the Marine Corps when they want you to really listen. I guess they always want you to really listen.
Yeah.
But here's God saying, listen to this. Go ahead, verse 2. You can go.
The Lord our God made a covenant with us at Horeb. The Lord did not make this covenant with our fathers, but with us, with all those of us alive here today. The Lord spoke to you face to face at the mountain from the midst of the fire. While I was standing between the Lord and you at that time, to declare to you the word of the Lord, for you were afraid because of the fire and did not go up the mountain. He said, I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery.
So here you have the equivalent of Israel being delivered from the slavery of Egypt, just as we are delivered from the slavery of sin by Jehovah, by Christ. Go ahead, verse 7.
You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make for yourselves an idol, or any likeness of what is in heaven above, or on earth beneath, or in the water under the earth. You shall not worship them or serve them, for I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity.
That's disciplining. You could read that word as disciplining because of sin. Visiting the iniquities. Go ahead.
Visiting the iniquities of the fathers on the children, and on the third and the fourth generations of those who hate me.
Let's just stop there. There's a tendency here, and I'm not gonna get into the debate as to whether it's genetics or whether it's environment or whether it's choice, but there's a tendency that children will have the same strengths and the same weaknesses, the same areas of failure as their parents, and that will continue generation after generation, absent of regeneration by the Holy Spirit. And that's what he's pointing here, is that the sins of the fathers are on the children, onto the third and fourth generations of those who hate me. So if you look at a friend who's not a believer, and you look at their parents, you can see where they're going to be most likely when they become old. Okay, let's continue. I'll continue. Verse 10, but showing loving kindness to the thousands, to those who love me and keep my commandments. So here's the other option. So you have the option of repeating the sins of your parents, your grandparents, your great-grandparents, or loving Jehovah, loving Christ, and keeping his commandments. One or the other. You shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain, for the Lord will not leave him unpunished who takes his name in vain. Observe this Sabbath day to keep it holy, as the Lord your God commanded you. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is the Sabbath of the Lord your God. In it you shall not do any work, you or your son or your daughter or your male servant or your female servant or your ox or your donkey or any of your cattle or your sojourner who stays with you, so that your male servant and your female servant may rest as well as you. So here you have the repeat of this resting Friday afternoon, Friday evening from sunset to Saturday evening to sunset. And it's a rest from labor. There's a lot of religious ways to deal with this, but labor is working for a profit, working to produce something for your own personal needs. There's nothing here that prohibits you from helping somebody else on the Sabbath. Actually, Christ very clearly points that we should help others on the Sabbath if we're called to do so. Verse 15, you shall remember that you were a slave in the land of Egypt, and the Lord your God brought you out of there by a mighty hand and by an outstretched arm. Therefore the Lord your God commanded you to observe the Sabbath day. Go ahead, continue at verse 16.
Honor your father and your mother, as the Lord your God has commanded you, that your days may be prolonged, and that it may go well with you on the land which the Lord your God gives you. You shall not murder. You shall not commit adultery. You shall not steal. You shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife. You shall not desire your neighbor's house, his field, or his male servant or his female servant, his ox or his donkey, or anything that belongs to your neighbor.
Let's stop on that one. Coveting's a big one. You see something, you say, boy, I really like that. And next thing you know, you're serving the attainment of that material item rather than serving God. And you see that a lot where I don't know if you ever heard the term keeping up with the Joneses. That doesn't mean anything to you, does it?
No idea.
But the Joneses would be like the people in the neighborhood who have everything new, and then the neighbors see that and say, oh, well, they got a new car, I need to get a new car.
Right.
They they planted some expensive shrub, I need to get some expensive shrub. And that's all association with coveting. You start serving material things. Verse 22, go ahead.
These words the Lord spoke to all your assembly at the mountain. From the midst of the fire, of the cloud, and of the thick gloom, with a great voice, and he added no more. He wrote them on 2 tablets of stone and gave them to me. And it came about when you heard the voice from the midst of the darkness, while the mountain was burning with fire, that you came near to me, all the heads of your tribes and your elders. You said, behold, the Lord our God has shown us his glory and his greatness, and we have heard his voice from the midst of the fire. We have seen today that God speaks with man, yet he lives. Now then, why should we die? For this great fire will consume us. If we hear the voice of the Lord our God any longer, then we shall die. For who is there of all flesh who has heard the voice of the living God speaking from the midst of the fire, as we have, and lived? Go.
I'll continue at 26.